This week, the things that happened are Mandalorian. We're going to talk about 2 episodes because I actually tried to catch up before filming. DiFranco's tour. We have Cradle of Filth and Devildriver's tour. Let's get into the things right here on That Just Happened. All right, so real quick about the show. This is the sister show, I guess, to the Week in Nerddom, to my main news show that I do every week. Once the news happens and, you know, the movie gets released or the album gets released or we have time to play the game, then the coverage basically stops as far as news goes. So this is the show when, you know, I finally get around to watching the movie, listening to the album, playing the game, reading the book, whatever it is. This is where we talk about it. Sometimes it's pretty quickly after the thing has happened. Sometimes it's months or even years later, which if you've watched the show previously, you know that, you know, I think one of the movies we talked about last week happened approximately 6 years ago. So there you go. Yeah. Real quick, also I need to address it here in this video is I am working on timing. I know that the That Just Happened show, I need to get better about timing because I keep putting them out like a day apart because editing just kind of is a pain in my ass sometimes and I'm the only guy who does the thing, so I have to get better about my schedule and staying on top and in front of things. I understand that. Stay with me, nerds. I appreciate those of you that are, those of you that are interacting with these videos and all that jazz. Much appreciated. Let's get into more of your takes on the things that we talk about here on the show. But I'm rambling now. So, like I said, this week's That Just Happened. We're starting things off with Mandalorian because, yes. So episode 3 was called The Convert. Episode 4 is called The Foundling. Episode 3, everybody's taking a lot of issue with episode 3. I feel like, yes, there could have been more Mandalorian in The Mandalorian episode 3. Absolutely. I think the world building is going to pay off a little bit more towards the end of the series. I think a lot of people were chalking this up to, well, we're not getting the Republic Commando show, whatever, I can't even remember what it was supposed to be. We're not getting the Gina Carano show that was supposed to cover a lot of this material, so they had to find a way to inject it into Mando because that's kind of what they did with Mando into the Book of Boba Fett. And I understand that take, and very likely that is accurate to a degree at very least. I think, though, that this did a lot more world building than anyone really sees just yet. And that's already been paid off in episode 4 because they were talking about that mountain peak that the doctor, what's his name, was touching or went to go touch anyway in episode 3. We already got a little bit of payoff for that because we saw it in Grogu's flashback in episode 4. So I think there's going to be a little bit. Favreau's playing a little 4D chess with us right now, because it's the what is the gun? What's his name's gun in theater, where if you show a gun in the first act, then by the end of Act 3 you need to use the gun. I think that's kind of what's going on here, is he's setting up some story, some plot ideas that are then going to pay off, hopefully by the end of this season. More likely, though, it seems like they're going to pay off in a future season or even in another series that is, you know, directly correlated with The Mandalorian. So it could be Book Boba Fett Chapter 2 or Season 2 or whatever. That remains to be seen. But I think what's going on here is a little bit of world building and a little bit of setup for future plot devices. Could have been done a little bit more eloquently. I think it felt pretty clunky because you got bookends of Mandalorian. You got this big, long 30-minute, 40-minute chunk of not Mandalorian, and that seems out of place. I think we could have, again, interspersed the storytelling a little better. From that, though, we're going to move over into episode 4, and we get a little bit of Grogu's backstory, and the exact piece that everybody was looking for in season 2, and that is who saved Grogu from Order 66. Jar Jar saved Grogu from Order 60. Well, all right, not exactly Jar Jar. What's his name? Ahmed Banks, I believe is the actor's name. He was the voice of Jar Jar in the prequel trilogy. So he's been getting a lot of slack for that, been getting a lot of hate even for that, because that character is widely hated even by non-Star Wars fans for a number of reasons. So they already kind of gave dude a little bit of redemption because he hosted the kids game show that was set in the Star Wars universe on Disney Plus, I think. It might have been even the Disney Channel, I can't remember. But he was the host of that show. It was very reminiscent of kid-oriented game shows of my childhood, so like Double Dare, or I forget what the Mayan temple thing was, but it was very similar to that kind of stuff. But now even normies who don't have a Disney Plus subscription or Disney Channel subscription, whichever one it aired on, now they also get to see the redemption of this actor, because this was great. I feel like the choreography was a little clunky, but I don't know that he's necessarily an action actor kind of person. So maybe they were working with a limited ability of the actor, but still, I think the storytelling worked super, super well. I really, really appreciated how they faded into and out of Grogu's flashback. I think this episode could have been padded out a little bit if we had taken some of what we got in the previous episode. You take about 20 minutes of that 40-minute interlude in the middle of episode 3, and you also use that during episode 4 so that you get a little bit more of an even runtime, because I feel like the inconsistent runtimes is also kind of a really jarring, disjointed feeling when it comes to storytelling. So again, feel like it could have been a little bit more eloquently done. But yeah, it's still the best Star Wars that's happened since oh man, I want to say since Lucasfilm was sold to Disney, but I don't know. I feel like maybe Force Awakens is on par, not quite as good, but close to as good as Mandalorian. Mandalorian though is just like I'm gonna find a way to get physical copies of this show, man. It's I don't understand the hate. Yes, it is going a little slow. I will acknowledge the slowness of season 3. Maybe get to the point a little bit faster, but I don't know. I just love it. Whatever. So we also get a lot of world building as far as like the Mandalorian way of life, which I think is also super awesome in episode 4. We potentially could have made this episode a little bit longer with that kind of stuff too. You could have gone for at least like another 10 minutes where we get a little bit more of the Mandalorian creed. You speak when you know. I just watched it too, and I can't remember the exact quote, but one speaks when one knows, or something along those lines. Is such a cool way to accept Grogu for being Grogu, and also incorporating him into the Mandalorian way of life, and I'm just super excited. I don't know. That's Mandalorian. I think that's all we're gonna cover. Just this culture expansion of who the Mandalorians are is fantastic, and I'm here for it. Even if it does, take another 4 episodes to finally get to the point, or we finally hear Grogu actually say words or something along those lines, I'm totally here for it. The rest of the show. All right, so next we're talking about Ani DiFranco. I've always heard it Ani DiFranco. I've never actually heard her say her own last name, so I don't know. I saw her live. We talked about this at the end of the last That Just Happened episode, that this is what was going to be happening going forward, and it happened. It was a lot of fun. I didn't really dig the opener. And I felt very out of place around a bunch of tree-hugging, hippie-type feminist whatnots. But either way, the audience aside and the opener aside, Ani DiFranco puts on a hell of a show, man. Her drummer is highly impressive. And her guitar playing, while she's not doing anything like technically spectacular, she has very, very good precision. Her right hand is a metronome. This woman knows how to play her guitar. She is, at this point, she's into her 50s, so she's been doing it for some time. And you honestly would not know that she was as old as she is by the performance that she does. Very, very impressive. Not exactly my biggest cup of tea, I guess, to coin a phrase. But I listened to some Ani DiFranco, Franco again. I don't know. Back in the day when I was in like high school and stuff, and my girlfriend now is a bit of a fan as well, so that's why we went. And yeah, just I mean, if you have an opportunity to see it, this is again, not technically spectacular, but very precise and good, and just a hell of a show. She puts on quite the deal. That's what we've got there. Let's talk next. Another concert. Went to 2 shows in the last week. Another concert. This one was Cradle of Filth and Devildriver. This is my 4th time seeing Cradle of Filth, 3rd time seeing Devildriver. The opening bands were Oni was the first band, and then Black Satellite was the band after. And all right, so let's talk a little bit about how big touring shows like this are structured. The Ani DiFranco thing, she does whatever she wants because she's the one who writes. She's always been independent. She's very do-it-yourself kind of woman, and she's built a world around that. The rest of the music industry that is subject to record labels and Live Nation and touring managers and so on and so forth, and album sales functions this way. So when you have bands that are on tour together, generally it is decided who is going to be the headliner, and the order of the lineup is decided by album sales. And I guess Black Satellite had more album sales, it had better album sales, had some sort of bigger monetary gain than Oni, which seems very odd to me because I have never heard of Black Satellite before this show. I did a little bit of research before the show happened. I listened to a couple of tracks and went, oh, this is the band that's going on tour with Cradle of Filth and Devildriver? Really? Oni, I had heard of before. They get played on Sirius XM's Liquid Metal station fairly regularly. They have twice now had a feature spot from Randy freaking Blythe from Lamb of God. And one of those songs that Randy was on, they also had a spot from Iggy Pop. So their last single had both Randy Blythe and Iggy Pop on it, and they are still somehow the openers for this show. Just doesn't seem right. There's a weird marketing element to this that I think whoever it was that decided these things definitely dropped to the ball on this. And this is not even talking about performance-wise. This is just talking about, you know, the perception. I like to think that I have a relatively aware perception when it comes to music that I'm into. I'm very much into Devildriver and very much into things in that nature. Cradle of Filth less so, but it just seemed very odd that Oni was opening the show when Black Satellite was the less well-known band, but whatever. The big reason why we went to this, because like I said, I seen Devildriver a few times. I have a few of their albums. I have like the first 3 records that they put out. I will probably get the newest record that just came out. But not exactly like my favorite band of all time. But Cradle of Filth was the co-headliner. And girlfriend is a huge Cradle of Filth fan. So it was like, yeah, okay, let's go. But even the big Cradle of Filth fan, after the show went, oh, Cradle of Filth should never follow an act like Devildriver because they put on a hell of a show. The Double Trouble, I think they're calling the tour Double Trouble or something like that, should be switched. If we're talking about progressing through in heaviness, I understand why Cradle of Filth would be at the end, though. Even if you're doing that, lineup, I still think Oni and Black Satellite should be switched, because Oni is a heavier band than Black Satellite. Black Satellite was not a good band, but Devildriver is sufficiently heavy. They would be, they were not necessarily on par with Cradle of Filth, but pretty close to the same. So flipping them and still trying to maintain a progressive heaviness throughout the night would still fit, because, I mean, Nymphetamine is not a super heavy track. Her Ghost in the Fog definitely has its moments. But let's talk about the actual performances, because Oni definitely impressed. Like, their vocalist, I feel like, could use a little bit of kick in the ass as far as like stage presence and energy goes, but by and large their performance was impressive. I didn't think they were going to be that good live. They definitely were that good live, and so it was a welcome surprise. Black Satellite was worse live than on their records, and they did a cover of Rammstein. There is a list of bands that no one should ever do covers of, and Rammstein is probably towards the top of that list, because it's Rammstein, goddammit. And I will give her credit where credit is due. At least the vocalist knew the German lyrics, because it was not one of the ones that has an English version. They did Sauna. So yeah, to her credit, she did know the German lyrics, but just the delivery was not great. Performance was not great. This band is just not my cup of tea, I guess is the way to put that. Devildriver's performance was impressive. Like I said, this is the third time I've seen them. The last time I saw them was at a little bit of a larger venue, and they had a little bit more relevance at that time. I feel like they've kind of stepped down a little bit in relevancy since COVID, and it's been, it's not since their last record, but the record before the last record, because this record and the last record are kind of work together. So the record before the last record was some time ago, and I feel like because of the gap between those two records, they've lost a little bit of relevancy when it comes to the heavy music scene. They're climbing back up with the most recent two releases, and with good reason, because their performances are stellar. The first time I saw them was in a tiny little club, and they blew the roof off that place. They played with Superjoint Ritual, and they outplayed Superjoint Ritual. Which at the time was not really difficult, because Phil Anselmo was drunk off of his ass, but still, he had Hank 3 on bass, and I was still more impressed with the Devildriver performance than the Superjoint performance. So there is definitely that. This night was the same situation. Cradle of Filth's new material works well. I do have an appreciation for the newest Cradle of Filth record, Humanity is Futile, Existence is Futile, that's what it is. Existence is Futile is probably one of their better records in a long time. This is also the 30th anniversary of their first record, so that makes me feel old, but yeah, they did a sufficient job, but just Devildriver just blew them out of the water, which they have a tendency to do. Last time I saw Devildriver, I think, was with Lamb of God, and it takes a lot to outshine Lamb of God. They definitely didn't do that, by my recollection, but I could be misremembering that show. It's not guaranteed that was the show that I saw, but if it was, every time I've seen Lamb of God, they are one of the top live acts ever. Like, just the impressive amount of technical things that they do and still are able to put on a show at the same time is just ridiculously impressive. And Devildriver puts on the show. They're just not quite as technical. They're a lot more groove oriented, which means, a lot simpler riffs and so on and so forth. So yeah, lots of fun. Definitely enjoyed myself. So this week, going forward, the things that are going to be happening, if you will, what's gonna happen is finally got my hands on a copy of Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey, so we'll be watching that. There's another episode of Mandalorian that's going to be happening this week, so I will try and line it up so that I can film after I watch the show instead of the last week where I filmed before I watched the show. And what else? I don't think there's much else, because I have a lot of work stuff as far as the day job goes. So that is all I'm going to actually, dedicate my time to promising I will be interacting with, but beyond that, it will just be perks and bonuses and such. So thank you for joining the conversation. What happened for you this week? Let's have that conversation. What did you interact with? What movies did you watch? What do you think so far of Mandalorian Season 3 now that we are halfway through the season? Are you enjoying it as much as I am? Let's have that conversation. Let's have all the conversations down in the comment section. Thank you very much, nerds. Or you can find me on social media at Generally Nerdy, all that jazz. We got to head out. Before we go, always remember that if it's generally nerdy, it's probably here, and that just happened.